Hi, welcome to Leap Taken. This is Mika, and here at Leap Taken, I talk about all things witchy, craft related, law of attraction, manifesting, esoteric, and everything else in between. So today, I want to have a nice little sit down video about solitary witchcraft and the assumptions about what it is, what it's not, and a little bit more on my thoughts because I'm a solitary witch. Spoiler alert. So what it is basically, for me, it's, I don't know, you practice magic your way, it's your spiritual system, you're calling the shots, you're by yourself ultimately. Doesn't mean all the time though. You can practice with a group, you can have friends who also maybe you do spells with, rituals, and you partake. You can go to drum circles. You're still actively participating with other people and doing magical intentional work. But ultimately, there's no foundation for you guys other than you're just getting together for this one specific purpose, but you don't have a coven. Get that? So, and not every magical system or spiritual path even recognizes covens. So that's okay too. So some people by default, because the spiritual path they're on, covens, that's not a thing. So they practice technically as a solitaire. I count virtual and online, as practicing in a group. And honestly, the way the world is set up right now, I don't think I could see maybe belonging to a coven. This is just kind of an add-on from this topic, but you could be in a coven and it all be virtual. You not all live in the same place. Every time you meet, it's on, like Zoom or something like that. I definitely could see how that's a thing. I don't see why it wouldn't be, right? Anyway. But yeah, you can still have that experience. Now, I will go into that. Can you be in a coven and still call yourself a solitary witch? Technically, you could. I mean, call yourself whatever you want. How do you practice? Ultimately, if most of your spells, most of the magic that you do is alone, and maybe, you don't really meet up with this group until maybe once a month or something like that, but you're doing other spells, you're doing majority of the work for yourself or other people, and it's typically alone, you're not consulting with anybody, yeah, you probably still considered solitary witch. I would say that. The benefits, it's your way. That's one of the things I like about it. Also, you can switch gears. So if you are on a specific path and it seems like it's been working up until this point, and then you're like, I was connecting with this particular path or this type of magic, and it's run its course. It doesn't have to be negative. It's run its course, and you're like, okay, I'm done. Let's start a new path. I'm interested in this, and you spend months or maybe years at a time on this whole entire new path. You can do so where when you typically are practicing with a group, I'll just say coven, more full time, it's a little difficult to do that because you usually are entering into whatever the coven follows. You're saying you're part of that too. So to change paths separate from that might not fly, might not work out so well. Also, you might not find value in it anymore. So, but when you work by yourself, you're not answering to anybody else. Not that that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying you're not. Which goes into my next one, accountability. And this is a benefit and a negative. The benefit is you don't have to check in with anybody. You're only accountable to yourself and whatever spirits, deity that you connect with. That goes along with not having to explain reasons for changes, the path. If you change your path, or if you, made a commitment, you wrote it down in your book of shadows, your grimoire, your planner, that you were going to follow a specific spell or ritual on a specific time, and you don't do it, there's no explanations other than to yourself. And my favorite reason and the benefit that I like being a solitaire, self-study. You can still study when you're working with someone else, of course, or a group, but it can take you in different directions. It's not that you're necessarily even changing anything. It just opens your mind. You start to have an entirely different way of thinking about things, and that's one of the benefits because you don't really have to go over that with anybody. It's just your own study, and it's affecting you in a way that it is gonna spill over into how you practice your magic. Prime example, you could have been reading all along about practicing a certain type of way. Whenever you do spells, you never did a circle, you never cast a circle, and then the more you look into it, the more self-study that you see, and maybe things you've experienced or witnessed from others, you would like to maybe cast circles before you do any type of, spells, magical workings, ritual, what have you. It makes sense to you to do that. That's fine. There's no explanation. You took the time to learn, and you can just enact it, and there's no one else to consider or include in that process. Pacing, timing, pacing, that's super beneficial. If you're a newbie and you're just coming onto this path, take as long as you want, or rush through the process. Who is it, me or anybody else, to tell you, oh no, you're supposed to take your time? A year and a day. If you want to do it, that's a Wiccan thing. If you want to do a year and a day, awesome. That's something that you can do for yourself, that for you to feel important about. That's something that's dear to you, something sacred to you, if you want to do that. If you feel like you are a fast learner and you've technically always sort of been in touch, maybe you didn't have the words, the language, or the right way to describe, but you've already sort of been a witch this whole time. So, you get on board, you learn a couple things, and you kind of absorb things very quickly. It just all makes sense. Okay, fine, that's great. You get to do that as a solitary. You're not, you don't have a high priestess or someone else of an authority, and that's not in a negative way, but you don't have someone else sort of pacing you out, so you learn at a rate, that's a general rate for all the newbies that came on board in the coven or the group or whatever. So, you bypass all that, and you can do it your way. You can take long, you can go fast, breaks. You can take breaks. As someone who has done that in the past, there was a time I took a major break from really doing anything. It didn't feel right. I felt disconnected at the time. Rather than having to explain, this is a benefit and a con, honestly, but the benefit is I didn't have to worry about explaining to anybody. I could just not do it, and oh well, it was on me. And finally, doing the spells and rituals that you want. That's that's a great benefit. You want to hex that girl at work that's getting on your nerves, or the guy that ran off and stole your car, whatever whatever the situation is. If you want to hex somebody, you can. Who's going to stop you? So that's a benefit. It could be a con, but it's actually a benefit. You do what the heck you want, right? So there you go. So some of the cons is the accountability. No accountability. Sometimes people need accountability. And if you are not taking the spirit realm as serious as you should, then you might get a little bit more acquainted with what accountability really looks like, because it might be forced on you. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is not about karma, because I'm not going down that road, but we'll just stay on accountability. I know that we have all come across people who maybe are, they put a lot of negative energy out into the world. They, intentionally, purposefully are hurtful to people. And let's say these people are practicing, some sort of pagan path. Don't make the mistake of sitting around waiting for karma to get them, waiting for their accountability to strike. One, I'm gonna let you know, sometimes people are being shown a different path. They're being shown the error of their ways, but they don't see it, they don't recognize it, they don't acknowledge it, and they just keep going. And they just live this life. It doesn't mean their world falls apart. And even if it does, they may not make that connection. So we're all individual. We all have our individual paths. So as the solitary witch, for myself, it's important for me to understand that I might not get it. I might not get a lesson, from my ancestors. It might completely bypass me because I chose not to see it, or I missed the symbols, or I totally screwed up the symbols, the signs, and everything they were telling me, or I ignored it. That's a con, practicing by yourself, because you're a little bit more susceptible to that. It is possible the universe is giving us signs and you completely ignore them. You completely disregard them, meaning you see it, but you want to focus on this over here. You can't focus on that right now. I'll come back to that later. You never come back to it. When, it was put in your face multiple times about the new moon, and you knew it was going to be a new moon, but you just keep seeing everywhere, reasons to kind of dial into that particular day. And you had some things you wanted to do. You had a ritual you want to prepare, but new moon comes and goes, and you did nothing. It doesn't mean your world's going to fall apart and you're going to get punished by the spirit realm, ancestors, or anything of that nature. I mean, you could, but it doesn't mean that you will. It's just, you missed an opportunity. Tangent coming. I do realize that there are some people, especially in ATRs, I notice there's this conversation a lot about, oh, my ancestors showed me real quick. They they showed me, they punished me, and it's like a child-parent type relationship that I notice people are referencing, and I don't really see it that way. Yes, these are the mothers and fathers and aunties and uncles and cousins that came before me, my ancestors, that is. And the deity, I could see them, some goddesses I see in a mother figure role, and of course gods in a more father role. So I understand that up to a point. When it comes to punishment, like I'm a child, no, I don't see that. I don't work with ancestors or spirit in that capacity. I don't do that. So when I talk about accountability and things like that, I'm thinking more of missed opportunities, even if it's something that's possibly negative, missed opportunity to learn a lesson, a missed opportunity to benefit from something, all because it's all on you. There's no one else there to see it. Sometimes we can see it with other people, like, hey, do you notice this pattern of events that are occurring to you? Yeah, I think the universe is trying to tell you something. If you don't have that, that's a con. You might miss that. Tangent over. Isolation. So one of the cons is you might feel isolated. I have definitely had those feelings where it just felt so lonely, practicing alone all the time, celebrating, the different pagan holidays, celebrating the different lunar cycle, phase that's in, and just wanting someone to talk to about that in real life, not on the internet, someone to converse with in person, back and forth, and to share your cool stuff with, and any kind of haul that you got, witchy hauls and things like that. People who really get it. A sense of community. That can be overwhelming at times. I have had those times where it felt overwhelming, and I was sad about it, and I wanted community, and I did something about it, and I found community. It didn't last long because I don't know if that was my peak, my people, my tribe. But at the time, it was helpful to even try. Helpful to even try. And again, I don't discount having connections with people over the internet. As long as everyone's honest, it's an honest connection. Honestly, even if the person's not being totally honest, if your perception is that this is what it is, then that's what it is. And that's good. I don't see anything wrong with that. Validation. Some of us need validation, and no shame. We're all made a little differently. Some of us need validation from others. Some of us don't. You can start a YouTube channel and give validation that way, but when you're practicing as a solitaire, you sometimes want the validation of, am I doing this right? You want validation that, you are a real witch, you know what I mean? A real witch. You've reached level whatever in witchcraft world, the high priestess level or something like that. Maybe you want that type of validation. So you're going to want a group and things like that around you. So that's a con if you crave that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then finally, lack of information. So you can learn so much now. I mean, this is the days of information age. There's the internet, there's books, there's YouTube, there's Instagram. There's so many different ways, or we'll just say social media. There's so many different ways to learn about witchcraft in all different paths and applying all different types of techniques. So it's not so much a thing of the information not being there. It's more about you trying to understand the concepts and apply them, making them applicable to the way you want to practice in your life. And it could be a con when you practice as a solitaire, because sometimes it'd be nice to actually have a person or people available who've been where you are and can guide you a little bit further in a more structured environment. So it's not piecemeal where you're reading this, you're picking up this, and you've got to somehow put it all together. That could be a lot. And not even for a new person. I mean, if you've been practicing or calling yourself a witch for some years, because I've done this, and things change. You're not being spiritually fed anymore, so you know there's something up, so you start making changes in your practice. But now you're in new territory. Yeah, it would be nice to maybe have somebody to help kind of hold your hand for that first part and walk you through the process. And give me an explanation, a little bit more real world explanation on why you're doing this, or this stuff I'm reading. Do people really even do this, or is this just something the author, put in the book? Or do people go to this extreme or to this, level of whatever it is when practicing magic? Do they buy all the ingredients? Do they do all the things, So it might be nice to have somebody you trust, like I said, groups of people, who can guide you a little bit more one-on-one, So those are the cons that I came up with. Now, my thoughts on my own solitary practice, it's ever evolving, because I'm always studying, I'm always learning, and I'm looking to share. So there's always more for me to know. I don't think I'm done. I know all the things that's under witchcraft. No, I don't. But I kind of like that because it gives me opportunities to learn. So for me, having a positive attitude is helpful. And I know that sounds a little contrived, but when I say a positive attitude, I mean, I approach practicing magic with joy. I typically don't come from a sense of lack. I don't come from a confused state, and I definitely don't come from sadness. If I feel sad, if life is going a certain way and I feel really bad, that's not the time for me to cast a spell. Being prepared is a lot of the practice that we talk about as far as practicing witchcraft, and that is being prepared, having your ducks in a row, having your potions already done, having your crystals already charged. So when you have those moments where somebody died and you're really sad and you're heartbroken, you already have charged crystals. You already have that piece of jewelry that you're wearing that gives you a little bit more peace that day. You already have, some elixir that you created, maybe some infused water that you take and it's healing energy. You already have the ingredients, the teas and what have you. You already have those things on hand. That is, in essence, a large part for most of us practicing witchcraft, is sort of really being prepared. So, positivity comes easy for me because I'm proactive about everything else. When I do my spells, because I think you can get more power out of joy and love than you can out of hate and anger. Doesn't mean that doesn't work, because I've been pissed off and hateful and angry, and I have cast spells, and they have worked. And sometimes energy needs to match energy, depending on the type of spell you're doing. So, I mean, let's just be honest. But ultimately, I like to come from a place of joy. I get more stuff done that way. That's just the way my practice is working so far. I thrive working on my own. I caution the word independent. I don't like that, because I think as humans, we're all dependent on someone in some capacity for something. But I thrive working alone. I like creating things custom to just me and how I think and what I like. And whether it's spells, whether it's a vision board or something like that, I like having those types of solitary activities to do, things that resonate specifically to me. So I do good in that type of environment. Back to that validation, it's still possible for me. It's not that I want to say I seek validation, but it's nice, right? It's nice when people like your stuff. It's nice when you talk with people and they recognize what you're doing, and it does feel good. So that's still part of my practice. I'm not so above where I can honestly say, oh, I don't need any validation from any outsiders. Yeah, it's nice to have that sometimes. And I feel like I have a nice balance of that within my solitary practice. Um, I like the mystery of witchcraft, and part of that is mystery. You don't know everything, right? And I don't really want any someone else telling me something else. Um, that's probably an Aries thing. My sun sign is Aries. It probably has a lot to do with that. We'll just say that. But I kind of want to find it out on my own. I like the mysterious pieces, and I like to uncover uh, more of the mystery that is under the very big umbrella of witchcraft. I'll find that out on my own. I don't need someone else to tell me. I like that in my practice. Um, the experience of a coven. So I've had that experience, pseudo experience. It was a group. We didn't say, we were gearing toward that. I know there were several people who wanted to form an official coven. And at that point, I might have joined just because I was curious, but not because of a real need. I know that now about myself. I don't have a really burning desire to be part of the coven. I like the sense of community, though. I'm open to something maybe like I said, something virtual, and because again, just the world we live in today, not everybody's going to be connected, and who knows if there's that many pagans around me, witches around me, practicing witches around me. And we could create a full 13 people coven. So maybe not so, but I'm open to, a little bit, adding some other people. Like I said, a sense of community. We call ourselves a coven. I'm still going to practice and do my own thing. I'm telling you that right now. And I'm not going to tell you every time I do a spell. And I'm not going to share everything that I do. But I'm willing to share. I'm willing to be open and help others and do whatever I can with anybody else. I'm willing to do all that sort of stuff. But I still would ultimately like to consider myself a solitary witch. So, because I like it. And then, which the last point, I like having things my way. I really do. I like the pacing that I have. It's been more, I had to think about it. It has been more than a decade that I've been practicing witchcraft. And, it wasn't a straight line. It's evolved. I mean, there was a huge part of my practice. I didn't even work with any ancestors. I didn't even work with a deity. I didn't work with anything. I would just say spirit and keep it simple and keep pushing, and I was still, popping as a witch, so I was still getting stuff done. But I didn't even do that. And when I really think about it, it's interesting, how it evolves. That's why you gotta write stuff down, have a record, because it's really fun to look back and see where your thoughts were, and where your life was and how witchcraft intersected that. So, because there were some times where things were really great, and it's not always the bad times, or not always the bad times, but the more challenging times in our life. But it's the good times to pay attention to that. Like, what did you notice a rhythm or a flow to it? And you'll know that if you keep some sort of journal. Was there like a wave of just one thing? Job loss, relationship breakdowns, and all kinds of other, really challenging stuff in your life. And then follow the next wave, everything was flying high, the relationship worked out, or you got a new relationship, you got a great job, and all this other great stuff was happening, and that went on for some time, and then there was another, dip where, there's death, sickness, something like that, then there was another high. And you start to see a pattern, you're like, wait a minute. So there's just been a sequence of patterns, or did you just have a whole stint of just, no, everything was great. I had nothing, really crazy stick out. That's the kind of stuff you want to pay attention to. What were you doing? Did you have a daily practice? Did you not have any sort of daily practice, or it's all in your head, and you kind of just enacted your witchcraft that way, you practice it that way with thoughts, affirmations, mantras, things like that. I don't know, I find that sort of stuff interesting, because we're not going to all be the same. Some people could just art journal for a year, and it's a level, it's still practicing magic and witchcraft, because they're pouring so much into that, intentionally speaking. Anyway, it's wild. I journal. That's the message on that. But I like doing it my way. I like having that option. of just doing a bunch of crafts, you know, paper crafts, and calling that magic, calling that spells, or calling it a working or a ritual. I like being able to do that without someone dictating instructions, you know, on how it should be as a group, or, you know, not that covens all work that way, because it sounds kind of negative when I say it like that, but ultimately I like to do things my way. I like to set my own pace, to do or not to do, change my mind, change the date, you know. That's how I am. It's working for me. It's been working for me for some years now. So those are my thoughts on practicing witchcraft as a solitary witch. Looking back at it, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change anything. I love the sense of community. I think most of us probably still crave a little bit more of that. It's always fun to talk to other people about, you know, this type of stuff. Open freely. You don't have to use coded messages. And you can just talk about your experiences in the same way, you know, people talk about theirs in their spiritual path. It would be nice to just kind of, you know, regularly talk to a group of people and just speak freely. So yeah, I still like that. I like the idea of that. But other than that, yeah, I dig my whole situation. I like the way I practice. Oh, yeah, I probably wouldn't change anything at this stage. I like where things are going, and I'm still learning, so who knows? It might change anyway. All right, well, thank you for watching. This is Mika with Leap Taken. Please like this video if you've enjoyed my content, and subscribe if you have not already, because I'd really like that, and I'd really appreciate it. And if you have subscribed, I really appreciate it. I thank you very much. All right, bye.